The Met Police has estimated that up to 100,000 people took part in a pro-Palestine march in London yesterday. Other demonstrations took place in Cardiff, Glasgow, Birmingham. I also saw in Leeds, probably many other cities across the country. 10 people were arrested as protesters called for freedom for Palestine and stop bombing Gaza. The force has said the arrests were in relation to offences involving fireworks, public order and the assault of an emergency service worker. The Gaza Strip has been blockaded and bombarded by Israel after its Hamas rulers launched a series of deadly terrorist attacks on the 7th of October. Right, I want to speak to the former Met Police officer Chris Hobbs today to kick off the show. To ask you, Chris, how do police go about policing such a demonstration? 100,000 is the estimate from the Met Police. Very difficult.
It was huge. I mean, I was there yesterday purely to observe what was going on, as I often do at protests, and I write about them afterwards. But it was huge. I've not actually seen a demonstration as big. It's probably the biggest since the Gulf War protests all those years ago. So it was huge. Very difficult to police in terms of what's acceptable and what isn't. You can't put two lines of police along all those demonstrators. I was told that as people were reaching Whitehall and the stage in Whitehall, people were still leaving Hyde Park, Marble Arch. So it was a massive protest, very challenging for police. And other than one or two skirmishes that I saw, I think the police will be pretty happy with the way it went generally.
So a lot of people watching some of the footage that came from the protest yesterday will have been concerned by some distressing signs, also Islamist groups out in central London calling for things like jihad. Did you see evidence of extremism in the protest?
In all honesty, I didn't really, and that's not to say they weren't there, but as you said, it was a massive demonstration. Hizb ut-Tahrir, there was some comment on. They were at the Egyptian embassy, and there was some worry about their flag. They're not a prescribed organisation in the UK. Another organisation similar, Al Muhajirun, is, but these aren't. So they are free to protest, and I think their flag caused a little bit of concern yesterday.
Yes, well, there are calls for the law. Chris, there are calls for the law to perhaps change when it comes to that particular Islamist group. I know that in the States it's a prescribed terror organisation, I believe. But it's quite interesting because we heard chanting of jihad. Now, jihad is a word that many people will see it as having terrorist connotations. Now, the police said the word jihad has a number of meanings. We know the public will most commonly associate it with terrorism. We have specialist counter-terrorism officers here who have a particular knowledge. They've assessed the video of those with the flag filmed at the protest in central London and have not identified any offences arising from the specific clip. Now, I find it hard to get my head around that because for many people, they would have found that incredibly intimidating to see Islamists out chanting jihad on the streets of London. Surely there may well be a crime in there, even though the police seem to have, said, oh, all right then, that's all right, no crime committed.
Yeah, I think jihad has got lots of different meanings, hasn't it? One of them is to establish an Islamic caliphate, which would effectively wipe out countries like Morocco and Egypt and so on and so forth. What the Met do, of course, in these situations is actually take advice. They take advice from legal people, as well as organisations, etc., etc. Of course, even if they did go arresting these people, you then, and it's a little bit like that from the river to the sea chant, which is also controversial. You then got to get it past the Crown Prosecution Service. You perhaps start a gravy train for leftist human rights lawyers. And then you have to put them before a court and convince a jury. So it's not just the Met making these decisions, it's people behind the Met who are concluding basically that if it was these people were put before a court, it probably wouldn't get very far. But yes, it will be intimidating, and I accept the meaning of jihad for most people means blood and violence. But these will be looked at, and of course,
in the context of the current conflict in the Middle East. I think that's likely what many people would see it as a calling for. And we've seen the government talk tough on this. But as you say, the police don't seem to have teeth when it comes to this, perhaps, because you've had the immigration minister on the channel earlier talking about how visas should be taken away from those who are seen to be supporting Hamas. Surely, if you're flying the flag of an Islamist extremist group, you are supportive of such terror.
Well, that's maybe Hizb ut-Tahrir are, but they're not prescribed. And at the end of the day, the final decision as to whether to bring them before the court isn't going to be that of the police. Yes, it is. I agree. It is intimidating. Perhaps it's something we don't want to see on the streets of London. But then the government will have to turn around and say, right, as far as we're concerned, Hizb ut-Tahrir is a prescribed group. And that would make life a lot easier for the police because it's much more clear-cut than it is at the moment. And that Islamist flag, yes, it is, but it's not one of the flags. It's not a Hamas flag. It's not a Hezbollah flag. It's not an Al-Majroon flag. So, again, if you bought it before the CPS, probably that will be about as far as it will get.
Interesting, very interesting. Thank you very much, Chris Hobbs, former Met Police officer. I hope you come on the show again. Thank you for your time.